Good evening, and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Live on this Friday evening in December on a full moon. We are going to be exploring and discussing the phenomena of karma, and specifically the ways in which we can work with karma and work with the lords of karma to assist us with any suffering or any struggles that we are dealing with of a karmic nature, which we find overwhelming. We find it's a little bit too much to deal with, because sometimes we will find ourselves in those circumstances. Sometimes we are living with the results of our past mistakes, our past actions, which very often extend back to previous lifetimes. And we carry with us at times a very heavy karmic burden. And as we are saddled with that burden, as that karma expresses itself in our life, we may just feel exhausted, overburdened, even defeated by it. And the path is not without its mercies. Certainly our innermost and our Divine Mother are always there for us. And truly, we are never really given more than our capacity to handle. But the path is not easy. And the Masters of the White Lodge know this. The Masters know this better than anyone, because one doesn't really have to imagine all that they have gone through to get to where they are as ascended masters. Just look at the life of Jesus and the crucifixion and all that he went through. And we'll be discussing that a little bit later and how that relates to our ability to negotiate karma, because the two things are directly related. So at times we are faced with, again, a karmic burden that it's just too much for us to handle, or we may feel it's too much for us to handle. We're being beaten up, we're exhausted, and we seek some reprieve, we seek some lightening of the load. So that's what we're going to be discussing tonight, because there is a methodology, there is a process to which we can accomplish that. And just before we get into that process, we'd like to take a moment and just review what karma is and what it isn't. Karma is not a system of punishment. That is not what karma is. Karma simply means cause and effect. The universe is a miraculous and wonderful menagerie of balanced energies that are in a constant state of flux. The transformation of energy is the one constant in the universe. And movement is the second constant in the universe. Nothing truly stands still but the absolute. So all manifest reality, all energy is in constant flux, is in constant motion. And if you have tuned into some of our previous live streams, you know that that motion is of a vortex nature. It's a spiral, spiraling upwards and inwards, or upwards and outwards, or downwards and inwards, or downwards and outwards. There are other movements, of course, that these basic spiral movements contribute to and construct in various dimensions and dimensionality. So, for example, the torus, it comes to mind immediately. But insofar as that is the case, those energies, positive and negative, masculine and feminine, and the union of those energies need to be in balance, even if in any particular circumstance, or in any particular being, or in any particular event, they are out of balance or appear out of balance. So in us, for example, we have a lot of negative energy. We have a lot of egos. We carry the burden of a great deal of karma. Again, the effects of our past behaviors, our past mistakes. So we live with the defects and vices which we created as a result of our past errors. And those defects and vices are precisely there to attract into our lives circumstances, people, and events of like frequency, because like attracts like, and we attract what we are. And as those people and circumstances and events and tests and trials and ordeals are attracted into our life, we have an opportunity to learn, to overcome, and to learn our lesson and to regain some of the balance by paying our karma. Because if we are out of balance, we have taken on a debt, a karmic debt. So by paying that karma, we are helping to regain our balance, but also restore balance to the universe. When we talk about incurring karmic debt and paying karma, ironically, one of the worldly institutions that we can turn to is banking. It goes without saying that the global banksters play God here on earth. And the borrowers and the lenders are essentially giving of themselves in order, they're taking on debt. They're borrowing and taking on a debt which they need to repay with interest, no less. We're all familiar with how banks and banking works. But the word currency specifically comes from this notion of a current, something which flows, be that electricity, energy, water. These are currents. And so a medium which allows for the transference and the flow of energy and the mutual exchange of energies. That's why that medium was given the name currency. We know it better as money. And in the past, money has taken on many forms, including gold, that which was mined, which has intrinsic value because of its nature, because of its properties and qualities. And later, the global banksters switched to what they call a fiat currency, which is a currency which is backed by nothing but debt. And in more recent years, the development of what they call crypto-currencies is an attempt to bring an element of tangibility or of intrinsic value back to currency, so that the currency is not a gigantic Ponzi scheme, as the fiat currency system is, but rather they do this crypto, Bitcoin mining operations, and where these banks of computers are doing complex mathematics equations and solving complex mathematics equations. And as they do that, they create the so-called Bitcoin, this cryptocurrency. And of course, this is not a lecture about cryptocurrency, so we won't be talking about the shared ledger and the blockchain, et cetera, and all the different technologies behind that, because that's not the point of this particular lecture. The point is that we have in the world this analogous phenomena called currency, called money, called banking, called debt, that we can all understand, that we all, one way or another, we have to live with. And if it helps you to grasp what the nature of karma is, then think about it in terms of a bank or a currency. And think about that word currency and currents as it relates to energy and as it relates to balancing the books. Imagine, if you will, a place in the universe, not in the physical universe, but at a much higher, a more subtle plane of existence. There is a place where cosmic accountants, divine accountants, work non-stop, incessantly, to balance the books of the universe, to balance the credits and debits on the cosmic ledger of the megalocosmos, all the galaxies, all the planets, all the beings on all those planets, and all the beings in the ascended worlds, and all the beings in the infernal worlds, and all of the debits and credits from the cosmic treasury of light are being tracked, are being kept. And these divine accountants are working tirelessly to, again, balance the books, to balance these energies, to manage the great law of karma. These divine accountants were known to the Egyptians as the jackal-headed Anubis and the lords of karma. Anubis being the god of the underworld and the god of death in the Egyptian mystery school. And here we see just some other depictions of the same deity. On the right, we see Anubis here holding the scales. And on one scale is a heart, and on the other scale is a feather. And that is part of the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Egyptian mysteries, upon death, it is Anubis and the lords of karma who will measure our heart. They will weigh our heart against a feather. And if our heart is heavier than a feather, we will be fed to the waiting crocodile. In other words, we will be thrown back to mechanical nature. We will go into limbo. We will go into hell, to klipoth, and await karmic circumstances to be appropriate for us to return and live another life, live another lifetime, and attempt to lighten our heart, to reduce the karmic burden, the weight bearing down on us by our egos, which are manifestations of our karma. They are those defects and vices which attract those circumstances and people into our life that we need in order to learn our lesson. So that's Anubis, and he and his lords of karma, they have to do this work. It is their duty. And they intelligently manage karma, just like a fund manager at an investment firm intelligently and actively, proactively manages a portfolio of investments. The difference being is that a fund manager manages those investments with the goal of profit. Anubis and the lords of karma manage the portfolio of energy, the portfolio of cause and effect, the divine cosmic ledger, in order to balance the books. So it's not so much a finance analogy as it is an accounting analogy. But nonetheless, it is very much a infinite portfolio of debits and credits, which they are monitoring and managing. And it is to Anubis and the lords of karma that we turn to make our appeal, to request a special consideration with regards to whatever karmic burden we are suffering from, and that we are finding too great, too burdensome, overwhelming. And how do we go about doing so? Well, we enter into meditation. And the meditation that we perform is one where we utilize the 4 steps of relaxation, concentration, visualization, and prayer. And we would enter into meditation and appeal to our innermost being to travel in the supernal worlds, to go to the heart temple of the great law. And we appeal to our innermost with great humility and surrender and a attitude, a truly humble place. This is not a demand that we are making here. This is a plea. We are plea bargaining to have our karma reduced. And so we plea with all of our heart and all of our sincerity and all of our earnest emotional investment, with great humility, we would pray, Mother of mine, Father of mine, you who are my true being, we beg of you to hear us, to hear our petition, to travel to the heart temple of the great law of karma. There, before the temple, perform the salutations to gain entrance to the temple. Walk the 7 sacred steps into the temple and kneel down before Anubis and the lords of karma. Now, when we make this appeal in meditation, we want to use our creative imagination and visualize this process. We want to put our conscious energy and our creative imagination into activity so that we see ourselves, our true selves, making this journey, entering the temple, walking the 7 sacred steps, and kneeling down before the throne of Anubis and the lords of karma. And from there, we can make our appeal directly to Anubis. And we would plea, Master of the law, we beg of you, we plead of you to lift this burden, this karmic burden from our shoulders. And in exchange for answering our plea, in exchange for lifting that burden from us, we promise to perform this work or that work. We promise to do this or that or the other thing. This is the key. This is what it means to negotiate your karma. Remember, Anubis and the masters of the law, they are balancing the books. You have a karmic debt that you need to pay. And at the moment, the way that karmic debt has been orchestrated by your own divine mother is a certain way. But if that's not working, if that's not having the preferable result, meaning you're not learning your lesson, you're not alleviating the burden by suffering through it, you're not learning your lessons, it's just weighing you down and possibly even causing you to commit more errors and dig yourself deeper into debt, into karmic debt. This is not preferable to anyone. And it's certainly not preferable to the Brotherhood of the White Lodge. It's certainly not preferable to the Logos. And it's certainly not preferable to the Lords of Karma. They will know this. They see this. They are the ones who manage the books. They are the ones who manage your account, your karmic account. They know what you owe. and they know what you have in the bank, so to speak. They also know what everything is worth, karmically speaking. So if you are carrying a burden, a debt that you cannot pay back, and it's causing you to fall further into debt, then you have an opportunity to offer a alternative to paying that karma. So what are some of these alternatives? What could they be? There's a few questions, so let's take some of these questions because they're related. Is this a soul contract? No. No, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about negotiating karma. It is a contract that we are making, but we're making it directly with the lords of the law. And Eleftheria follows up by asking, how can we repay if we don't remember anything in the next incarnation? You pay karma whether you remember what you're paying for or not. You're living in the present moment and you're suffering what you're suffering. And that's why it's so important to observe yourself and awaken and know yourself, so you can extract from your experiences the self-evident experiential knowledge, the gnosis, the comprehension of the egos that you're dealing with. You don't need to worry about the past lives and what exactly you did that was a mistake. What you need to worry about are the egos that you're living with as a result of that mistake, because the mistake that you made was caused by the egos that you're now living with. The two things are related. And comprehension brings you into a place of knowledge, of gnosis. Because remember, it is your innermost being who needs to know. We're just a vehicle, we're just a vessel for our innermost being to live life and to pay karma and to do what they're here to do. So it's not necessary for you, Eleftheria, or I, Attila, to know these things, to know exactly, because we weren't around X lifetimes ago. Because X lifetimes ago, you weren't Eleftheria. You might not have even been a woman. You could have been a man. And you certainly weren't the personality that you are now. That's just a character that you're playing. Genevieve says, guilt makes the burden heavier. If you have guilt, yes, that's certainly going to make things worse. If you add more weight on top of it, and that's why you have to beware of things like guilt and shame. Guilt is shame, and shame is just the flip side of pride. It's just another form of narcissism, where it's all about me, which is ironic, because you would think that guilt, especially if you do something to somebody else and you feel guilty about it, your mind, your ego mind, is telling you that, oh, you're such a good person because you feel guilty about it, right? That must mean you're a good person. But you're feeling guilty about it because you're obsessing over how badly you feel about it, how badly that other person's suffering is making you feel. You're not focused on the other person's suffering. You're focused on how their suffering is making you feel guilty. That's where your focus is. That's self-centeredness. It's not genuine altruism. That's not genuine compassion. Guilt is a negative emotion. Guilt is one of those very tricky tricks and traps of ego. Again, related to shame, which is the flip side of pride. Yes, no, you never saw it that way because the ego mind doesn't want you to be able to see it that way, right? Our egos are designed to be clever and subtle and tricky, and to hypnotize us and fool us and con us and get the best of us, get the better of us. In many ways, they are like the con artists, the phishing scams, the casinos, the drug dealers, and all the different manifestations here in the world of criminality, including the white-collar criminals, including all of the so-called legitimate forms of theft. Because criminality is really about taking from others for themselves. And that's what the egos do, right? They enslave our consciousness and they steal our sexual force, our sexual energy. And they do so by getting us to indulge them, their cravings and their cravings and aversions, in other words, desires, and falling prey to their identifications, their rationalizations, their attachments. We believe that they're our attachments, and so we commit these errors, these mistakes. We make these mistakes over and over again, and so we're accruing more karmic debt. We're borrowing energy and giving it to egos who are just consuming it. And this has an impact on a community level, right? On a family level, on a community level, on a national level, on a planetary level, and on a cosmic level, on a cosmic scale. And that is what the Lords of Karma are balancing. And that's what the Lords of Karma are trying to constantly keep track of. So we're suffering from some tremendous karmic burden. We've, in meditation, in prayer, in visualization, we've asked our innermost being to travel to the heart temple of the great law, to perform the salutations before the guardian of the temple, to gain access to the temple, to walk the 7 sacred steps into the temple, and to kneel down before Anubis and the Lords of Karma. And there we pray as though we visualize ourselves, as though we were there at the foot of the altar, at the foot of the throne of Anubis. And we beg and plead him to hear our proposal. And what is our proposal? What is the bargain that we are going to ask Anubis to strike with us? Well, what is it deep down in your heart, in your soul, that you know you need to do or could do or should do, but haven't done until now? What are the mistakes that you know you are doing What are the defects and vices and flaws that you know you have, that you know you act on, that you know causes suffering for you and possibly suffering for others, which you have not acted upon up until now? What are the ways in which you can alleviate the suffering of others? What are the ways that you can help others with their karmic burden? We can't give you the answer to these questions. This is a process of self-reflection, of contemplation, of meditation. You should ask your Divine Mother, you should ask your innermost being to give you these answers, to fill your heart with the knowledge before you go before Anubis. You know what you're going to ask for when you get there. And this will take some time for you to, well, perhaps not. Perhaps you already know the answer. You already know what you should be doing or could be doing, or what you can put on the balance scales. So let's look at an example, right? Let's look at an example, one that we've talked about in the past. And at the time when we were dealing with the epilepsy, and which we had experienced and we knew to be demonic possession, and we had had terrible experiences, and there was nothing, no medication was helping, and we lost our driver's license, and we lost our work, and we were living at home, and we lost our fiance, and our entire world collapsed in around us, and we were feeling this tremendous burden. And our understanding at that time was that our burden was karmic, that the epilepsy, the demon that we were living with, was as a result of our own karma. And so, and we went to that whole process of having that exploratory brain surgery done and everything else. We've told the story before. And it led us to that place where we surrendered our entire life to our innermost being. And we said, you lead us, you show us how to overcome this epilepsy thing, and we will dedicate our life to you. And we will do whatever you tell us to do for the rest of our days. Now, we weren't making that deal with Anubis directly. That's just a conversation that we had. That's a conversation I had with my innermost being, and that's a conversation we had with the Logos, which is related. But that's a unique situation because it turns out it wasn't actually a karmic burden. It was a burden that we took upon ourselves. So it's related, but it's not exactly the same. But it gives you an example of the type of negotiation. And it gives you some sense of the flavor of the negotiation that you want to be able to offer Anubis. It could be that, again, it could be any number of things. It could be as simple as, I promise not to swear anymore. I promise not to be abusive to people online. If that's part of your personality flaws, is that you tend to be very aggressive or abusive to people. Or perhaps you're a sarcastic person and you belittle people in conversation, be it online or in person. And you use sarcasm often. Well, sarcasm is a form of mental violence. It's a form of doublespeak. It's very crude and cruel on the mental plane. And it can really hurt people. It can really harm your relationships. It is not, sure, it can be very clever. It can make you feel very clever and superior. And sure, it can be very, quote, funny, but laughter at other people's expense is not it's not a something to pursue on the path. So that is an example of something that you could promise that I'm going to make extra efforts to no longer be sarcastic. Or you could say, you could give up something as well that you know is bad for you, or that you know is bad for the environment, or you know that's bad. For example, you could say that you're going to give up alcohol. Or these are sort of petty, sort of simple, petty things. If you're dealing with a serious karmic burden, you have to offer up something that's on the balance scales, on the same, it's on the same level, has the same weight to it, the same significance. And again, only you know what that could be. But the reason why we shared with you our experience is that if what you promise is aligned with the work of your innermost being, and if what you promise is aligned with the work of the Logos, then there's a very good chance that that karmic burden will be alleviated in some way. In our case, again, we promise you help us overcome this epilepsy thing, and we dedicate and devote our life to you. And that was just basically us having that conversation with the Logos, with the Christ, who, by the way, Anubis and the Lords of Karma are one with. So take that for what it's worth. But as soon as we made that promise, and as soon as we made that commitment, we received an answer right there and then. Go online, type this into Google, and we found the website. And we've told you the story before, where we found the diet that we put ourselves on, and our seizures stopped the next day. And that was the beginning of us overcoming this particular burden which we had taken on. And we haven't looked back, because this is exactly, Genevieve, what we are about to get into. We have remained true to our promise. That's why we are now on what's today? The 37th episode of Atlas Live, and countless other videos and blog articles and posts and everything that we do, plus all the other work that we've done with relation to the Atlas project. If you make a promise to Anubis, the Lords of Karma, the Brotherhood of the Great White Lodge, the Cosmic Christ, the Logos, if you promise and they accept your offer, they accept your promise, they take you at your word, and they alleviate the karmic burden for you. In other words, they uphold their end of the bargain. If you fail to uphold your end of the bargain, you are setting yourself up for a world of hurt. Because this is not to be taken lightly, what we're discussing here tonight. This is not some game, and this is not some new age thing to do, like affirmations or something that you do flippantly and unconsciously and mechanically. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, karma's negotiable. Yeah, easy peasy. I can negotiate my karma, no problem. If you have that attitude, you will suffer tremendously, because the karma will come back with interest. Because it's not so easy for the lords of karma to shuffle around the debits and credits in order to accommodate you and your request. That takes effort, that takes energy on their part to accommodate your request. So they have made an accommodation just for you, with the understanding that the accommodation that they make is a worthwhile investment based on your promise, based on what your offer was to balance the ledger. If you fail to uphold your end of the bargain, you will have to pay for that, because you've now taken on a whole new karmic debt. Because whatever investment that Anubis and the lords of karma had to make to accommodate your request, they had to pay that. They had to make a debit in order to pay the karmic burden that you are requesting be lifted from your shoulders. So that those credits, that currency had to come from somewhere. And where it came from, there's a debt, a hole that is waiting to be filled by your offer, the promise to repay that service, that accommodation. Do you see? If you renege on your end of the bargain, if you renege on your agreement, that hole, that debt that is there as a result of the accommodation that was made to you, that hole, that debt must be paid. And if you're not paying it back consciously, then it will be paid unconsciously, subconsciously. And that's the egos. That's going to be coming up from the subconscious. And it's going to be paid in terms of suffering. Because they're going to, you will be encouraged to realize your mistake, to realize the error that you made by making a deal with the lords of karma that you didn't intend to keep. Or perhaps you intended to keep it, but you didn't keep it. That's the point. Intention is nothing. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. You might have gone into that negotiation with the best of intentions. And in the moment you promised this and that and the other thing, but then you didn't really take it seriously. Or after the karma was lifted from your shoulders, you're like, oh, okay, now it's smooth sailing. And you forgot all about your promise. Or you kept your promise for a little while, and then you got a little bit lukewarm on it, and then eventually it just sort of petered out. And you forgot all about it. Well, you might have forgotten all about it, but on the divine ledger, in the cosmic accounting department, believe us, the lords of karma do not forget. They cannot forget. Dylan asks, read that the government is part of a cult religion that uses subtleties to tell us of their plan so they won't get bad karma from their action. Them disguising it is a way of us approving of that. The world has enough of that karma as is. there's no hiding anything from the lords of karma. There's no the eyes of justice are always watching. It is the all-seeing eye of the Freemasons. And, you know, cults come and go and they can believe whatever they want to believe, but that doesn't make it so. Karma is not some it's metaphysical science. It's cause and effect, like Newton. For every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's that same law that we can witness on the physical plane, but it's on the metaphysical plane. So there's no cheating the lords of karma, just like there's no cheating death. You know, they say, there's that cliche, there's only two certainties in life, death and taxes. Well, it's kind of ironic, but the two certainties in life are death and karma. Right? We have to pay what we owe, and sooner or later we will pay it. One way or another, we will pay it. Because one way or another, the ledger will balance out. It has to. Because we're talking about the whole body of the universe. The great multiplicity of the logos. And if you look at the yin and yang of the Tao, it is complete. It is a whole. Genevieve says, good intentions are not meaningful, but are the bad ones are? What matters is the end result. There are exceptions to that rule. So, for example, how you get to the end result does matter. We'll give you an example of that. So many chaos magicians and black magicians can perform healing. And many of them perform great healing, but they use black magic to perform the healing. And they incur a karmic debt, not just for themselves, but for the people that they're healing with black magic. Now, you might ask yourself, why would that be? Why would that be? They're healing, like they're being a healer. Like surely that's a good outcome. That's a good end result. That's a positive end result. And they had positive intentions, right? They had good intentions. I'm going to heal that person of their cancer or of their whatever. And they used black magic or chaos magic to heal that person. And as a result, they incurred a karmic debt on themselves and on the person that they were healing. Now, why would that be? Everything that happens to us is in accordance with the law. It's in accordance with the great law of karma. Anubis and the lords of karma are trying to balance the books. They're trying to manage the energy. They're trying to help people to learn their lesson and to help people ascend and to pay back their debts. And that illness for that individual is part of the unfoldment of the great law of cause and effect. Especially if that illness is karmic in nature. So they were born with it as a result of errors they committed in their past lives. Now along comes a well-intentioned black magician and heals that person, but does it with black magic. Now, what have they done? They've thrown a monkey wrench in the works. Now that person might be healed, but they were not meant to be healed. They were meant to work through that illness on their own, or they were meant to die from that illness. And now all of a sudden they can't do that. That illness has been taken from them. And now the lords of karma are stuck trying to figure out not only how do they reorganize everything to make that person be able to pay back their karma, but now they have even more karma to have to pay back. And remember, all of this is intelligently managed. As for bad intentions, they can be detrimental because of the fact that having the intention itself is already an act. So having the intention to kill someone, you're already halfway to committing murder. If you have the intention to kill someone, you're already a murderer in the astral plane, in the mental plane. You're already a murderer in your heart and in your mind. And the astral plane is just as real as this dimension. It's just as real. In fact, it's more real. But having good intentions that result in negative outcomes, it's the end result that gets tracked and that gets accounted for. So that's why when we talk about surrendering to the will of our innermost being, our being doesn't have intentions. The innermost being does. It's our ego that gets in the way with all sorts of intentions and self-righteousness and all sorts of things. Yeah, but I had good intentions, or, I had the best of intentions, or I wanted to do good things, or what have you. Coming back briefly to this question about healing, when a Gnostic performs any healing or prays for healing or prays for anything, indeed, when we make our petition to Anubis and the Lords of Karma, we should always end every prayer with, may all this be done in accordance with the law. May all this be done in accordance with the law. So anything that we're praying for, we always have to be cognizant that we are praying for, asking for, pleading for, or bargaining or offering in our negotiation, that we recognize and that we communicate to Anubis or to our innermost, to the Logos, that we are asking for this, we're praying for this, and we're begging and pleading that it be done in accordance with the law, the great law of karma. So whatever we're asking for, we're cognizant and aware that we're asking for a lot, and that in order for our prayer to be answered, it's going to require an accommodation by the great law and by the Lords of Karma. And they hear our prayer, they will receive our petition. Our Divine Mother will go to them and make a petition on our behalf. And they will look and say, yes, we can accommodate this. We just have to shuffle things around in the following way, and then we can make this happen. Roy says, the New Age is always talking about intentions. Yes, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. hell is filled with souls languishing, but it's who still believe that they don't even know that they're dead. They still believe that they're alive, and they still believe that they're doing God's work because they're still completely hypnotized by their good intentions, and they're in hell. Intentions are another trap, another trick of the ego mind, another way that the Black Lodge enslaves us and gets us to, again, do harm to ourselves and to others, even as we believe ourselves to be doing good. Joel says, so we say a prayer to Anubis to petition, use good karma to pay for bad karma. Okay, so this question about good karma and bad karma, there's just karma. There's no such thing as good karma and bad karma. There's karma. What there is are debits and credits. So what you owe and what you've earned, what you have in reserve. So you have debits and credits. It's just like a bank account. So most of us have a negative account. We owe a great deal. And so what the negotiation is that I'm being made to pay back my karma in this way, but I'm finding this too burdensome, too difficult. It's too hard. I'm unable to pay back my karma this way. So I'm going to go to Anubis and offer to pay it back a different way, by doing good things, by doing good deeds, or by changing myself, or to give up a vice, or give up several vices, so that I'm paying the karma not this way, but this way. I'm still paying into the system, right? I'm still paying karma. I'm still paying off my debt, my debt. It's just that I'm doing it in a different way than the way that was ascribed and prescribed to me by my Divine Mother in accordance with the great law, and in accordance with the lords of karma, because everything is done in accordance with the law. So all the karma and all the karmic burdens that we face are in accordance with the law. So if we find ourselves again in a quagmire, in a locked in a Chinese finger puzzle, and we can't get out, then we can turn to Anubis. We can beg and plead for negotiation, for an accommodation. Listen, I can't figure out this Chinese finger puzzle that I'm locked in. So would you please dissolve this, free me of this burden of this Chinese finger puzzle, and I will do this other thing instead. And if it may be done in accordance with the law, and the lords of karma see it as on par, that they'll say, okay, all right, we accept your offer, we accept your promise, but keep your promise. Benjamin says, religious leaders who make lots of money because they know how to brainwash people have good intentions too, and sometimes achieve good results. Do they deserve good karma? Well, we're not sure which religious leaders you're referring to who make lots of money. If you're talking about people like Joel Osteen and his, with their mega churches, and in our experience, religious leaders who make lots of money because they know how to brainwash people, they don't have good intentions at all, really. And no, they don't earn karmic credits. Most of them are black magicians. or awakened demons. Most of them are black magicians. That's why they can perform those so-called miracles, right? They just, like there's used to, what was his name? Benny Hinn. There was this guy that used to like, touch people, and they if we want to talk about religious leaders and karmic money, and then there's this other issue. Like, look at those new age gurus. Look at the Eckhart Tolles and the Deepak Chopras of the world. And we have this meme that we made about 90% truth can kill, and how some of the most dangerous teachings and dangerous gurus are the ones who take their followers right up to the border, right up to the gate, right up to the entranceway, and then hold them there, keep them there, just outside, just on this side of the border, on this side of the line. And there's countless books and teachings and channeled material and all sorts of nonsense. And many of the people who fall prey to this, especially this channeling thing, and we've talked about this before, many of those people certainly are well-intentioned. They have good intentions, because that's exactly what the demons and the black magicians are preying on. They're counting on that person having good intentions, and that the person's naivete and desire and mystic pride, their desire to be a new age guru, is exactly what the demons prey on. They love that. They search for people like that. They're easy victims. It's a con artist would call it identifying a mark. And surely you must have watched at some point in your life a Hollywood film about glorifying some con artists, or confidence artists, and these scammers and whatnot, and they're glorifying them and they're romanticizing their craft. So you must have heard that terminology about, maybe a mentor and apprentice con man are talking to each other, and they're talking about, okay, yeah, he's a good mark. That's a good mark. How do you spot a good mark? That's like a hunter identifying prey, or a predator on the Serengeti identifying the wildebeest which is wounded, or the gazelle which is young and infirmed or sick. The predatorial instinct is to seek out prey which is weak, easy prey. A con man calls it easy money. They're looking for naive, weak marks. Wow. If it's like that for criminals in the world, why would it be any different for demons and black magicians in the internal worlds? And when you speak of gurus, and when we speak of religious leaders who make lots of money because they know how to brainwash people, really, what are they doing? Like any confidence artist, they're preying on the weak. They're taking advantage of the weak. They're telling these poor, suffering souls what they want to hear. Give the people what they want. That's not a spiritual leader. That's an entertainer. That's Hollywood's mantra from 100 years ago. Give the people what they want. And And actually, that mantra goes all the way back into the theater. Give the people what they want. So that's why you have these charismatic and showy and dynamic and entertaining mega churches. And that's also why you have these new age gurus which expound these beliefs which feed mystic pride, which feed the naivete of so-called light workers and star seeds, and fill them with everything that makes them feel spiritual, because that's what they want. They want to feel good. They want to feel spiritual. Right? There's a big difference between feeling spiritual and being. Have you ever heard us say anything about feeling spiritual? Have you ever heard us encourage you or give you practices or offer you teachings or direct you in any way towards feeling spiritual? So Genevieve asks, pharmacia. Now, we're assuming you mean there the pharmaceutical industry, but perhaps we're not sure exactly what you mean by that. But if by that you mean giving people what they want in terms of a pill to ease their symptoms, then yeah, it's exactly what it is. Because that's what the allopathic healthcare and the pharmaceutical industry does, right? I'm sick, I feel bad, I want to feel better. Right? And that's what drugs do, right? That's what psychedelics do. Psychedelics make you feel more spiritual, but they don't make you be. Well, we did our best, Benjamin. So let's move on, because of course, unless there's any other questions on negotiating karma. Yes, Eleftheria, they're just all interested about treating the symptoms and not the cause. And if you really feel into the new age consciously, you realize that that's what the new age is about. Right? They're treating spiritual symptoms. So feelings of emptiness, feelings of worthlessness, feelings of whatever, or feelings of reactionary feelings against the society and the way the rest of the world is, which is so cold and mechanical and technocratic. So the new age offers this beautiful vision. Oh yes, and the coming global awakening and everything else. So all of these, which really the coming global awakening is nothing but a repackaged and rebranded Christian rapture. I mean, surely anyone with any reasonable sense of consciousness can recognize that the coming global awakening that the new age sells to the masses it's just the Christian rapture. You know, when Jesus returns and he's going to raise everybody from the dead, and Jesus is going to rule for 1,000 years, and it's going to be this beautiful, it's going to be the Garden of Eden is going to return to earth. Doesn't that sound an awful lot like the global awakening, the new global awakening, when everybody's going to awaken? And even the new age people conflate the two, and they say, hey, listen, when Jesus said that I'm coming back, He didn't mean that Jesus the man was coming back. He said that Christ was coming back, and that the Christ is going to facilitate this grand global awakening. And so they admit, not all of them, but some of them not just admit it, but embrace the Christian rapture. And they recognize, hey, listen, Jesus is not a man. Christ is not a man. Christ is a force in the universe, which Jesus embodied. So when Jesus said that he's coming back, he was speaking as the Christ, and the Christ has returned. And so that's their basis for their new age version of this grand global awakening. It's just the Christian rapture rebranded. But that's what people want to hear, because that makes you feel good, and that makes you feel positive, and that gives you a positive outlook. And it allows you to do what? Which is the new age is like famous for. You've heard this term before for sure. It's called spiritual bypassing. New Agers love to avoid facing the facts. Yeah, but even that is just an allegory. Because Satan is not a person, right? We can't read scripture literally. We can't fall into the trap that the Christians do, which they read scripture literally, and they think that it's a literal history and a literal that's when Christ said he's going to return in the flesh and fight Satan. That's because Christ is in you and in me and in every one of us, as is Satan. Because in each and every one of us, we all have an individuated essence of the Christ. We have a spark, a seed of the Christ, our innermost intimate Christ inside of us. And he's desperately trying to fight Satan, who is what? Our individual shaitan, the amalgamation of all of our egos, of all of our defects and vices, the manifestation of all of our karma. But it's the Christ. It's not Jesus the man here in the flesh. It's Christ, the essence, here in the flesh and in you in the flesh. A left here says, we all started with lies, Santa Claus, etc., and never want to give it up. This is true. There's the ego mind, right, wants to continue to sleep, because it's the ego mind wants to keep the consciousness asleep so that the egos can have their way with us. The ego mind is a tool of hypnosis. To grow up, you may be referring to, well, it's a very common thing now, this phenomenon of, you may have heard this expression, man babies, and certainly the younger generations, the bubble wrapped generations, who are wholly unprepared for the world. They're in their 20s and they lack half the constitution as children half their age 100 years ago. Children the age of 12 and 13 and 14 were working in mines and God only knows what else, or in Africa and places. Children around the world are put through incredible suffering and they're able to deal with it. We have 20-year-olds who are, they fall over in a hard breeze. So Joel says, the book of Revelation is a book of alchemy for the major mysteries. Like a battle manual for the alchemical process, the body undergoes in transmuting the 7 deadly sins to the 7 virtues. Yeah, those are the 7 churches of Asia. They're referring to the 7 chakras as well. The book of Revelation is not only talking about the end times, But more practically, it is exactly as Joel describes it here. It's a handbook. It's a guidebook for the revelation of the Christ within an individual, within you, within me. The revelation, the unveiling, the apocalypse of the Christ, and the defeat of Satan, the beast. And we've talked about this in the past. The mark of the beast is 666. That's a 6 in the mind, a 6 in the heart, and a 6 in the body. That's an inverted 9, right? To be an upright 9, to work with upright sexual energy in the ninth sphere. We talked about this in great detail just recently on Wednesday when we were talking about shadow work. And we were using the tree of life, and we were using the Star Wars analogies, and we were referring to the ninth sphere and being an upright 9 in the mind, in the heart, and in the flesh. Upright sexual energy is a 9. Inverted sexual energy is a 6. So in the heart, in the mind, in the body, inverted sexual energy, that's sexual energy which is being utilized in the negative way, in the wrong way, by our egos. Negatively polarized sexual energy, inverted sexual energy. That's the 666. That's the mark of the beast, which we wear on our arms and on our forehead. There is another aspect of negotiating karma, and we touched on it briefly, but we're going to expand on it, and that is the fact that some karma can be forgiven. We said at the outset that there was a relationship between the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ, of Jesus, and his ministry, and the forgiveness of sins, the forgiveness of karma. Now, this is obviously something which the Catholic Church and the Christians took and twisted, again, because they were about giving the people what they want. And who doesn't want to hear that their sins can be forgiven? That all I have to do is believe in Jesus Christ and accept him as my Lord and Savior, because he died for everyone's sins. And if I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, all my sins will be forgiven and I will be welcomed into the kingdom of heaven. Can we even begin to imagine all the souls languishing in Klipov because they believed that sales job by the Catholic Church and the subsequent Christian churches? And these Christian ministers, and their mega churches with their multi-million-dollar square feet mansions with their helicopter pads, still to this day selling this red herring. But they didn't get this idea. They didn't pull this idea out of their ass. Constantine and the fathers of the Catholic Church. This was part of the Christian Gnostic doctrine, the Christian Gnostic teaching. It's in the Pista Sophia. Christ, Master Aberamentho, came from the Absolute, and he incarnated as Jesus of Nazareth. And he walked the path of the Bodhisattva as the master of masters for this planet. And he made the ultimate sacrifice of the crucifixion, and he descended into hell, where he freed souls languishing there. And it was through his suffering and sacrifice that he was able to negotiate on behalf of this humanity with Anubis and the lords of karma. He was able to negotiate and change the parameters for how karma can be paid on this planet by this suffering humanity. And the two things he changed was that, one, karma can be negotiated, and two, that some karma can be forgiven. Some, not all, some. That is the legacy of Master Aberamentho and his life of suffering and sacrifice for humanity. Because he made, for lack of a better expression, a deposit. He earned karmic credits, and he made a deposit of karmic credits with Anubis and the lords of karma. Through his suffering and sacrifice and his tremendous love and all of his ministry and him and the healing that he did and the teaching that he did and all the work that he did accrued such a surplus of karmic credits, of positive energy, that he was able to go to Anubis and the lords of karma with that cachet of karmic credits and said, with this, I want to negotiate that the rules be adjusted. I would like an adjustment. I would like an accommodation for the planet Earth and the humanity living upon it. And that's why we have that doctrine that some karma can be forgiven, some sins can be forgiven. And that is what was twisted and degenerated into the beliefs of the Catholic Church and the born-again Christians, that all sins will be forgiven. No. Unfortunately, that's just simply not true. And after 2,000 years of the Dark Ages and the Crusades and 2 world wars and Vietnam and the Cold War and all of the atrocities and all of the karma and everything, it's really questionable how much of that surplus karmic credits are still available for sins to be forgiven. That said, we always, all of us, have the opportunity and the ability to earn karmic credits. Which means, and we can negotiate. So we can think of our negotiation in those terms. If I promise to do something which is going to have such a beneficial effect on others that I accrue karmic credits, then my negotiation is going to be that much more meaningful. My offer is going to be that much more substantial to the great law. Gen says, the forgiveness of sins by a priest in the church seemed too easy to be true for me as a kid. It never sat well with us either, because we never liked that card in Monopoly. Go to free parking, pass go, collect $200. Like, there was something about it that was just too convenient. And when we always felt that inner longing to be a good person, to be the best person that we could be, make a real effort to do so. And we saw so many people who didn't make that effort and weren't making that effort. And they would be welcomed into the kingdom of heaven the same way we are, after all of our efforts and sacrifices. And why? And are they going to behave that way when they get to heaven? What is heaven filled with sinners? It didn't make it just didn't sit well. It didn't make any logical sense, and it didn't feel right. It didn't feel right. We had tremendous admiration for the saints. We had tremendous admiration for those who fought and sacrificed and gave of themselves for the sake of others. And it just didn't seem fair. It didn't seem fair that tyrants and villains and criminals would be walking alongside the saints in heaven. And what is that like exactly? How could that be? What would that be like? It's like, oh, now all of a sudden, let's bygones be let bygones be bygones. And now all of a sudden, all the criminals and the tyrants and the villains are all, singing Kumbaya up in Eden. It didn't make any sense. Didn't make any sense. Now, redemption is possible. Redemption is possible. But it comes at a tremendous cost. If someone owes a great deal to the lords of karma, that individual must pay. That individual must pay what they owe. We all must pay what we owe. That's just how the system works. And again, it's not a system of punishment. It's a system of gnosis. It's a system of learning. It's a system of growth and evolution. And it's a system of devolution. It is simply the metaphysical exchange and the flow of energy and the constant transformation and transmutation of energies. And the tracking of that, the tracing of that. We call these debits and credits. So, but that's where this idea of forgiveness of sins and forgiveness of karma comes from, is that Master Aberamentho, Jesus, the Christ, was able to negotiate that accommodation on behalf of this humanity. So, in light of that, we can perform the same meditation as we would in a negotiation, and we can throw ourselves at the feet of Anubis, like throwing ourselves at the mercy of the court, and beg and plead for our karma to be forgiven. If we are dealing with something, suffering from something, it keeps coming back, we can't identify what ego or what's the cause of this, why we have to keep reliving this same episode or the same whatever it is that we're dealing with. And we just know deep down that it's a karmic thing, it's that we're paying. We can ask for it to be forgiven. There's no guarantee, but there is the possibility. That said, in our experience, which we've shared with you on more than one occasion, but again, this evening, in our experience, it is far more effective and ultimately more beneficial for us to make an earnest, worthwhile negotiation and a meaningful offer which we intend to keep. Because in the end, we will be much better off for it, especially if our offer entails, our promise entails doing the work of our innermost and dedicating our life to our innermost being and surrendering to the will of our innermost being and our Divine Mother and accepting our destiny and accepting the path as prescribed for us as a mortal vessel, servant, messenger of our innermost being. If your offer includes those words or those sentiments or near enough as makes no difference to those words and sentiment, and your offer is accepted and you keep your promise, guess what? Some burden, some obstacle that was preventing you from setting forth in earnest on that path has now been removed, and you have made a commitment to become a true human being, which is presumably why we are all here participating in this live stream. Right? None of us are here for entertainment's sake. I don't think. It's probably safe to say that you're not here just to kill time. This ability, this potential, this possibility is available to us all the time, anytime. But it is not something that you want to be doing on a regular basis. Again, this is not like a mantra or a prayer that you repeat over and over and over again. This is not a daily practice or a weekly practice or a monthly practice. Again, we reiterate, we cannot take the negotiation of karma lightly, and we must recognize and realize that we cannot keep knocking on the door of the divine accountants and asking them to make accommodations for us. Number one, we're going to run out of promises that we can make, practically speaking. And we're going to start making promises we can't keep, which we do not want to be doing. So if you use this method, if you take advantage of this possibility of negotiating your karma, be sure you know that it's something you really need to do, and be sure that you're going to keep your promise on the other end. Joel says, oh, hang on, where did it go? There it is. Once read that the power of the Sacred Heart to forgive sins is enacted as soon as someone turns their heart back to the commitment to righteousness. If you've read that and feel into it and read into that and feel into what those words are saying, that statement is talking about a negotiation. As soon as you make a commitment to righteousness, now the power of the Sacred Heart has the ability to alleviate karma, to forgive karma. It's forgiving karma, sure, but it's only forgiving karma because you've made a commitment to righteousness. And the karma that can be forgiven is equal to the amount of your commitment and the results of your commitment to righteousness. In other words, the righteous acts, the end results of your commitment to righteousness. Do you remember a few weeks ago when we were talking about the courage of conviction, and we were talking about Desmond Doss and the movie Hacksaw Ridge? If you didn't get a chance to watch that live stream, go back and watch it. But we were speaking about Desmond Doss and the promise that he made to God, because he was a murderer. He was a murderer in his mind, and because he had almost killed his father. And even though one of the soldiers says, "Yeah, but you didn't pull the trigger," and Desmond Doss said, "Yeah, but in my heart I did." And Desmond Doss convicted himself. He convicted himself before God. And from there was born his conviction never to touch a gun, never to point a gun at anyone ever again. And from there that was the origin of his conscientious objector status that ended him up in the Second World War on that island, saving the lives of all of those men in the face of certain death. So the commitment that we have, the conviction and the courage of our conviction, of course, observe and remember that Anubis is related to these scales, the scales of justice. And on those balance scales are the positives and the negatives, the credits and debits, and the weight of our heart. So it's karma is this balancing, and is this system for accounting these energies, this give and take, love and hate, love and fear, love and the antithesis of love. And Benjamin says, funny, I was just watching the meditation of the heart. And to bring down the light to us or to our heart was the idea of the meditation. There are many ways that we can use visualization and meditate on the heart and meditate on the light coming into our heart, of course. And to meditate on the sacred heart, if you're not sure what we mean by sacred heart, it's a well, there are obviously many examples of it. Here, let's use this one. Oh. Can you guys see that all right? We'll make ourselves there. Right, the Sacred Heart. You see the crown of thorns and the flames and the cross. That's usually how it's depicted, but there's many versions of it. As you can see, all you need to do is do a Google image search, and there are many versions of this particular that's strange. Don't know what just happened there. So often we'll see images of Jesus with the Sacred Heart in his chest. These are powerful when we're doing our own visualizations and meditations. We can find inspiration for those visualizations. Again, the internet is a marvelous resource because we literally have, well, in the case of Jesus and the Sacred Heart, we have 2,000 years of images, and many of them can be found online. Because, for example, this one here is a mosaic, right? This would have been in possibly even in from Roman times, or a Greek Orthodox church or something. But so maybe it's in Turkey, which was formerly Constantinople. So there's no excuse to say that we don't know how to visualize. Same thing goes with Anubis. Well, we just plucked these images off of a Google image search. Some things that we face, we cannot be negotiated in the way that we described. And it's important to know that. It's important to have, we're going to say, reasonable expectations, but it's better to have no expectations. It is better to be humble and simple, hopeful, but not entitled. If you go into a negotiation expecting your offer to be accepted, expecting accommodations to be made, you are not negotiating in good faith. Not with Anubis, not with the Lords of Karma. Because whatever karma you're facing, whatever debts you need to pay, and whatever karma you're facing, sometimes you need to face that specific thing. And you're facing that specific karma for a reason. And it can't be eliminated. It can't be lifted away or wished away or hoped away or prayed away, because you have to face the underlying cause of that suffering. So in our case, for example, we still live with the demon. We still live with epilepsy. The demon didn't go away. Our negotiation, our offer, was simply to ask for the guidance on what we should do so that we can work through the karma. We weren't asking for the karma to go away. We weren't asking for we were begging and pleading for an answer. And the answer came. We followed it. And of course, our seizures stopped the next day. And for the most part, were kept at bay. But the possession, the demon, the fear, the depression, none of that went away. But the seizures, we got a handle on the seizures. We got a handle on the seizures. We got our seizures under control. After a year, we got our driver's license back. We started rebuilding our life. We started continuing on our journey. So our negotiation wasn't for the karma of the possession, the karmic burden of demonic possession to go away. It was simply a negotiation, a deal that we made with our innermost. Show us the way and we will walk the way. We are not qualified. We are not qualified to solve this problem. Clearly, we're not qualified. And if this is part of the burden and part of the path that we chose, we are not qualified to walk this path. We're not qualified. You, Atlas, you are qualified. And the Logos is qualified. Alux. So we promise to serve you and be your servant. You tell us what to do and we will do it. And they did. And the proof is in the pudding. So there are different ways, there are different negotiations, there are different ways in which we can work with this science that we shared with you tonight. Genevieve says, the saint crown with thorns around the heart, wonder the meaning. Well, the crown of thorns were what were placed on Jesus' head when he was crucified. And that's the path of suffering, the path of sacrifice. The suffering and sacrifice of the path of the Bodhisattva. That's what's in the Sacred Heart. We suffer and sacrifice for others. That's what the crown of thorns means, among other things. It has more esoteric meaning as well, but it's not necessarily something that we can get into right now, because the thorns come from the rose bush. And Jesus is on the cross, is also the rose on the cross. That's the symbol of the Rosicrucians. Because the rose is the flower of love. But again, that symbol, it's the stem of the rose, the long stem rose, is thorny. Is that love doesn't come without pain and sacrifice and suffering. It's the double-edged sword, right? It's the severity and mercy of love. It's not just all flowers. It's not just all flowering blooms. It comes with the thorns. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you so much. We're also glad to be better. And Benjamin says, Genevieve, Jake, that one is heavy in symbolic meaning. Yes, what we were just referring to. All right. We are going to wrap this up, we're going to make it a shorter stream this evening. We've covered most of the topic. We don't want to stretch it out unnecessarily. It's a full moon tonight, so perhaps many of you would like an opportunity to do some meditation or to do some other practices as you see fit. Or perhaps you would like to take some time this evening and do a meditation and do a negotiation. Just keep in mind what we discussed tonight and what the important factors in a negotiation are. And that is that you make a reasonable request and make a reasonable offer in return for that request. Make sure that you plead that it be in accordance with the law, and that you be humble and flexible, patient, and remember that you're really throwing yourself on the mercy of the court, the divine court, of the great judges of the law. And if you are negotiating in good faith, and if your word is good, if your word is sound, and if it is deemed by the Logos that you will keep your promise and that your offer is good and that you are trustworthy, then there is a good chance that your request will be granted. But again, not to sound cynical, but there's that expression, right? Be careful what you wish for, because you will be held to account. If you make a promise to the lords of karma, to the guardians of the law, to the cosmic accountants, if you make them a promise and you don't uphold your end of the bargain, your end of the agreement, you will have to pay for that with interest. Just remember that. We're not saying that to scare anyone, but we just need to be absolutely clear that this is not a game, and this is not some new agey practice like affirmations or manifesting your desires or God only knows what. This is serious metaphysical science that we're talking about. And we're dealing with the great law, and we are asking for the great law to make accommodations for little old me. Just be aware of that. Just be cognizant of that. That's all. Thank you all for joining us this evening. If anyone has any questions or comments before we go, then by all means, please feel free to share them now. If not, then we will bid you a fond farewell, a good evening. Have a wonderful weekend. You too, Eric. You're most welcome. You're most welcome, Andrew. This stream helped us remember the critical nature of our purpose here in this vessel, in this life. Peace to you. And to you, brother, inferential peace. You're welcome, Genevieve. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you all for joining us. we're going to bid you all a fond farewell and good night, and have a wonderful weekend. And remember, if any of you are around Monday afternoons, we're doing a Monday afternoon live stream for those for the benefit of those in Europe. So if you're around Monday afternoons, you can catch us live again on Monday. Thank you all. Inferential peace. Have a good night.